Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Heart Set Above podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Georgia, and I'm here with my co host, Ellen. And today we're talking about refinement, a big one.
Yeah,
We're just
dun dun
talking
dun.
about working our muscles. And I feel like that was actually a very perfect segue.
Yes, I know we were. We were talking about how I am new to the gym. Georgia and I both have little brothers who are shredded and ripped and gym rats. And I am new to this. I'm learning about how to be a gym rat. And yeah, it is. And so this is what I don't know if this will apply to refinement or not. Maybe. Um, my brother told me about something called newbie gains. Have you heard of this?
No.
When you first start gaining muscle, right? Like you're so, well, at least for me, I'm so weak that when I first start gaining muscle, your muscles are like, "Oh, finally," and they like really pick up and you gain a lot of muscle in a short amount of
Right.
time, and you won't be able to gain that much later on in life. Like you learn quick right in the beginning. Your muscles learn quick in the beginning and then kind of plateau off. So, I don't know. Is there a parallel there to
Mhm.
refinement? Maybe not. Let's hope not.
Right, right, yeah.
Let's hope you don't
The hope
plateau
is
into
that
refinement.
refinement is lifelong. Um, Maybe it's like to I don't know, like to not be surprised if there is some like I suppose I don't know, sometimes it can somewhat speak to the Christian journey that I think some people can experience, where it's like the transition from being someone who doesn't follow Jesus to being someone who does follow Jesus. That can look like a lot of very drastic change. But then once you've been doing it for years and years and years,
Mm.
change becomes a lot more subtle, or you can become a lot less um, interested in the change that God could offer. And that's maybe the a risk of plateau, maybe. But
Yeah. I love that. But also, I don't think plateau is such a, like, you're right. I think it looks more subtle. It seems more subtle because there are newbie gains when you first become a Christian,
Mhm.
right? Like, there's so many things changing in life, so many things changing in your worldview and your perspective, what you're dedicated to, how you live your life, that it feels like this really high top, mountaintop experience with God. And you're excited about refinement. And then as you go through life and you get that deeper commitment to God and life, continues on, that refinement does look more subtle. And I think what I have seen a lot of people who come and they're feeling stuck in their faith and their life and their journey and their refinement. I think they feel like they have plateaued actually, but they're not. They haven't. They're just comparing it to that mountaintop experience of being refined early on in their journey, thinking that it'll look and feel like that when really, that part of their journey, though they might have another kind of like intense moment of refinement in their life, not that anyone really hopes for that, right? But because those are usually tend to be very difficult moments
Especially
in
like
life.
times of suffering.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But, that subtle refinement that looks like plateau, I think it would do us well to tune into what that looks and feels like as Christians so that we don't think we have plateaued or we have become stale in our faith. We can see it for what it is, like that subtle, it looks subtle, but it's really this deep inner refinement that you might not be able to see the way you would newbie gains. But, it doesn't mean that God's not working. You're not partnering with him to be refined. So maybe there is a parallel. Maybe we'll figure
Absolutely.
that out
And you
more.
you really helped me just there because I think I was working under the assumption that like plateau equals bad. Like it's like that's a
Mm.
sign of like lack of movement, but like
Hmm.
actually there's a steadiness also to plateau and like a sort of an even keelness and it's about learning to detect smaller and more subtle um ways in which God is working, I think.
Yes, I love that. God, you're right. Isn't that the definition of even love, like deep love, right? Like when I first married my husband, he bought me lots of flowers when we were dating. He took me on dates. He told me all these nice, sweet nothings. Now that we're married, I don't think I've seen flowers in a couple of years. No, really. He actually just brought me flowers not long ago. He's wonderful. But it looks a lot different. It feels a lot different than when we were dating. However, I would say that our love is so much deeper now than it was when we were dating or engaged or even newly married. And I think I would parallel that with our refinement in our love for and connection with God, that It looks more subtle, but actually it's much richer.
Mhm.
I think that's true about love in our relationships. It's also true about refinement. It looks more subtle, but it's so much more rich. But you're right. I love how you said, like, we have to tune in to the subtleties of it, because if we're expecting newbie gains in our refinement, we're looking for that big muscular, pump up, we will miss the subtleties of long-term, steady, devoted refinement with God. So, ooh, look, we
Wow.
stumbled onto something so unexpected.
I was going to say, trust two therapists to find a metaphor. Like, I feel like we could pull it out of thin air if we wanted to.
Some listeners are probably like, all right, guys, that is such a
Okay.
stretch.
All right.
That's
Move
true.
on.
Two therapists, no surprise. We can do pretty much, we go to the grocery store, pick up broccoli and be like, there's
No.
a parallel. Yeah,
Lunches.
greenness, newness. Well, Georgia, we're talking about refinement, and it's
Mhm.
not lost on me that this is such a big term that right. I think there are terms that we use in pop psychology and in faith circles, and we use them so often that we tend to like forget what they mean. Like, for example, boundaries. I feel like when you say boundaries, people are like, "Yes, boundaries. I'm aware," but then a lot of people I talk to are like, "What are boundaries? What is a boundary?" Right? I feel like refinement is similar both in pop psychology, though we don't really hear the term refinement so much in pop psychology, but sort of like self-help,
Yeah.
self-healing,
Self.
processing emotion. Yeah, self-work. Yeah.
Mhm.
But we hear this term refinement, or at least the concept, a lot in faith circles. How would you define refinement?
Hmm. I feel like yeah, like you said, I think refinement is different to kind of depending on like psychologically speaking or dependent on like if you're speaking in terms of um a Christian lens. I think when I think about refinement, I do see it as uh maybe you have noticed something within yourself that you I don't know, for whatever reason, sort of no like it's a lack of a sense maybe, or it's a gap, or it's something that where you feel work and attention is wanted or needed, or it's something you've noticed. Um, and I think it's maybe giving attention to that part of you.
Hmm.
And but I think it is, I would describe refinement as something quite journey oriented, where it is something of it's a long, long path, and it takes a long time, um, and there's lots of going round in circles, but it's often an opportunity of growth, I would say, but it's
Mm,
very
growth.
long-winded. What would you say?
No, no.
Yeah.
I love that. I think growth I just was like, ah, yeah, growth. Um, That is both a secular term and a spiritual term, I feel like that's a
Totally.
connector to those 2. Yeah, that's the overlapping term, because I think in pop psychology, we're obsessed with growth, growing, and therefore, I think that means, like you said, becoming more mature in maybe an area that you lack some perspective or maturity in.
Mhm.
And I think this is paralleled with the Bible so much, right? Like the Bible is full of charges to be transformed with the renewing of your mind, to grow, to mature in the Lord, right? We see this like multiple times. God says this to his people, Jesus says this, the apostles have said this. So I certainly don't think that the world, pop psychology, and the charges from God spiritually are at odds here. I think that
Right.
I think we're oriented toward, as humans, toward growth, toward refinement, right? So, yeah, growth, maturity, transformation. But I think you hit the nail on the head with one of what I would call distortions around refinement. I think there's a couple we could probably unearth, but I think the biggest one that I've seen is with Christians especially, is that they think this is how I grew up thinking about refinement, that it's like a leveling up thing, right? Like when I played video games as a kid, it was like I was on level 6 and I couldn't wait to get to level 7. That meant I was better, right? And I think this is how refinement was taught to me, how maturity, how growth was taught to me growing up in church. This was part of the distortion that was passed down to me, which was there are first of all, refinement, maturity is static. There's level 1 when you first become a disciple, and then all the way up to, let's say, level 25, right? And then you've perfected it. You're
Right.
Jesus, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then all throughout your spiritual journey, you're just like slowly leveling up. And I think what was so wrong about that perspective is that, first of all, it didn't allow for nuance. Like, I love how you said you can pick a portion of your heart or your mind or your perspective that lacks some maturity, that needs some growth,
Mhm.
and you can grow in that area. And so I think this static definition that was passed down to me about refinement made it seem like you as a person level up to a next, the next level of maturity, the next level of refinement, instead of, wow, this part of me is really mature, juxtaposed with this part of me that really needs some maturity and some growth and refinement. And so that is true what I've seen in myself, in every client I've ever worked with as well, is that there are some parts of us that are so far beyond
Mhm.
our age, right? Or what would make sense for how long we've walked with God. Then there's some parts of us that are so immature compared to where the rest of us are. And I think that's just true for all of us, that there are parts of us that are wise beyond our years, and then there are parts of us that really need some maturity and growth.
Yeah, I love that. I love this that you're noticing like this limitation with leveling up because I do think like even like the whole thing around leveling up. I remember thinking growing up that I could complete a characteristic in myself.
Yeah.
Like I remember being so terrified of like my pride, which I think within like the group of churches that we both grew up in, like pride was like the big bad. It was
Mhm.
and so I was always really scared, and so I felt like I had to achieve utter
Mm.
humility. Like I was like, I need to complete the levels of humility. Because
Right.
then once I've done that, then I can move on to other parts of myself. But this is the thing that I need to completely achieve. And just this idea of like it was such a distortion that I could completely achieve humility. That was never gonna happen. But
Yes.
it became like something where I was so anxious about it that I felt like I had to focus on it so much. Whereas I think if I'd allowed like the I suppose the space or like the gentleness to go, of course, that's an area of growth. It's always going to be an area of growth for all of us. But I don't need to spend all my time overemphasizing it. Like, if there are other parts that God wants to draw attention to in my character, I can then move away from that and go towards those. Like, like I think having flexibility and without rather than staticness.
Yes, this static, yeah, just you as a whole move up or move down.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying because so what happens, right? I love what you just said, and it painted a great picture for what happens when we make this about leveling up, about, like you said, moving through the levels of, humility or working through that pride, growing in our humility. How does that distort? What does that take away when we look at it that way?
It's I think it reduces the picture. Like it's like it kind of takes away the big picture of like God working in us and kind of reduces it to like this is the sin that I must erase or like completely eradicate from my life. Words we would use in churches. This is the sin I absolutely have to completely repent of. Like I feel like that's kind of, but it would be then that I can only see my pride. I can only see the sin. I can't see God's work in me. I can't see God wanting to transform me. I always remember my dad telling me, "You are not the agent of your transformation. God is."
Oh.
I loved, but it was like a tough thing to hear because I wanted to be the agent. I wanted to like be able to make myself humble,
Mm.
but it takes away the the ability to see God working and to see what he's doing in that area. Like it yeah, does that make sense?
I totally get that. I love what your dad said. You are not the agent of your transformation. God is. I think we should come back to that if we have time. But
Mm,
I love what you're saying. What does it do when we focus on, like, okay, I need to master pride. I
mm,
need to master humility in order to what? Like, I love what you're saying. It makes us focus on this one thing. We become hyper focused on it, and we become really results oriented,
right.
outcome oriented. how does that affect our worth and our identity?
Well, it becomes the basis of our worth. God
Yeah.
will be pleased with me when I am humble, or I will be enough when I am humble. I will be enough when
Yeah.
I am, I don't know, choose your characteristic, choose your
Yes,
righteousness, you
whatever
know?
your area, choose your
Yeah.
righteousness. Yeah, choose your area of transformation. Yeah, so true. That's what I see in
Mm,
my own life, in the lives of every client that I've ever worked with. Is they're eager to be refined, although it sucks when it happens, like we talked about in that really big tragic kind of way.
yeah.
But they're eager to be refined because they're so panicked to be worthy before God, to be worthy enough to accept God's love, right? And I think we create this conundrum for ourselves when we look at it this way, that we are eager to be refined. That's good. God praises that. But sort of the unspoken expectation is I'm eager to be refined because then there is a perfect level I can achieve. And that's when I can rest in God's love. I can allow Him to love me fully. The problem is that is a dangling carrot. It is always moving. We will never reach perfection this side of heaven. So, what I have seen in my counseling office is Christians come in and they're like, I am weary. I am tired. I have nothing left in the tank because I've been chasing refinement for so long and it hasn't, quote, yielded any results. And I think because of this distortion, they've locked into, I haven't perfected humility yet. Therefore, I cannot be connected to God. And I think that is the saddest, biggest distortion for so many Christians because we prevent ourselves from truly connecting intimately with God until we've reached this impossible level of perfection this side of heaven. And I can't imagine how God feels looking down. Jesus feels with the, holes in his hands looking down saying, I already paid the price. Your goal is not perfection. Your goal is connection with me. That's why I did that. So you wouldn't have to frantically strive toward perfection. Like how devastating for him to watch us go on this journey, toward perfection, never reaching it, always trying to attain it, making ourselves crazy and weary, all in order to achieve connection with God. And he's like, you already have what you desire. Now rest in it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I hear in that like the distortion is that refinement is something to overcome in order to have closeness to God.
Yeah.
Viewing refinement as an obstacle to relationship. Um,
Yes.
I don't think that's God's perspective on refinement. That's very much our human thing of like this is something standing in my way of something else, and therefore I need to jump over it or knock it out of my way. Um, like I don't like that's not I think how God looks at us and our refinement or areas of growth. Like I think He doesn't see it as something that stops us from being close to Him.
Yeah, thank goodness, right? Because we could never achieve that level of
Yeah.
perfection on our own. That's why Jesus had to pay the price.
Mm,
But yeah, I always offer my clients this visual, and I'm sure we have talked about it before too, that, I think a lot of clients see this as like a leveling up, right? Like, oh, I got to get to this part of the mountain. I got to climb to that part of the mountain to level up to that, level of refinement or maturity. And I love how you brought this up, that this picture just a minute ago, that it's this kind of windy journey. Refinement is this Christianity, our life with God is this windy journey with God. It doesn't go linearly, at least not the way we would expect. Maybe to God it's linear. I don't know. But to me, it looks like a, crazy, weird circle and sometimes like a maze even. But I think we have set our sights on the outcome. We got to make it out of this maze in order to achieve relationship with God.
mhm,
But I don't think that's God's perspective. I think he's like, hey, I'm the navigator here, like your dad said, right? He's the agent of our refinement. He just wants us to be connected to him
mm,
through this journey. Who cares where we're heading? Who cares how long or how soon we get there? As long as we get to be connected to God through every step in it. So I always talk to clients about, they're like, I feel like I'm on the mountain of refinement and I've just stopped and I'm sitting down and I'm weary and I can't go on. I'm like, great. Sit there. Just sit there with God. Like, let God pour over you his love, his compassion, his intense joy over you
mhm.
as you sit there and rest on this journey of refinement.
I love that even as like a practical for listeners, like if they are noticing a time, um, if they're noticing in themselves that maybe they feel weary, in terms of like they've had those mountaintops with God when they've noticed like great change in their life, and now maybe they notice them less and they feel weary because of it, to use that as an opportunity to not kind of continue down this path of like beating yourself up or feeling like this stands in the way as an obstacle, but actually using it as an opportunity to just be with God in that moment. And I wonder genuinely like what God would tell each person at that moment. I think he would probably tell us something all different, but I wonder about asking him that question of what do you want to say to me as I'm weary and as I'm tired from not changing or not having the change that I used to have. Um,
Yeah.
and just like, I wonder what he would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That just made me think, I don't know why, but as you were saying that, I was thinking, do you think, why do you think God is concerned with our refinement?
Mm. I think, um, hmm, why is he concerned with our refinement? I think because it does bring us closer to him. It's often a journey in which we experience greater connection and intimacy with him. And I think again, it doesn't go back it goes back to, like, this not being about the outcome, but it's about being on a journey with God and walking beside him on this incredibly windy road with lots of circles and, like, kind of same paths over and over and over, or labyrinths. Like, he experienced like, well, we experience him maybe with like, just more closely and more intimately in those places. Um, and I think he kinda loves that. Like, I think he's just like he revels in it. Like, we are his joy and his delight, and so, of course, if times of refinement are bringing us closer to him, that's his joy. He's just happy to walk beside us.
Yes, I love like that is so mind blowing. Listeners, rewind it and listen to that again. It's so true because you're right. I think I grew up with this distortion that God has this standard for me and I have not reached it. I'm failing and I need to hurry and achieve that standard in order to be loved by God, in order to have closeness, in order to be in right standing with Him. And what you said, and what I think is true too, is that it's true that God is concerned with our refinement. The Bible is full of, charges telling us be transformed, engage in the refinement process, allow yourself to mature, even though it's difficult, engage in that process. But I think we got the reason wrong. It's not because we have to attain this level of Christianity or discipleship in order to be good enough. It's in order to understand God more so that we can grow closer to Him, right? So
Mhm,
if that's God's top concern is closeness with us, that's why He's concerned with our refinement, then we are able to stop on that journey of refinement, lay down in the grass and say,
yeah.
God, I'm too weary. What would you say to me in my exhaustion here? Right? Like, let me experience closeness with you here and now without having mastered humility yet, or,
Mhm,
whatever jealousy or whatever it is,
mhm,
because the whole point of this anyway is to grow closer to you. And I would say this is like so meta. It's like in Christian inception, right? But I would say if you can do that, that is achieving the quote outcome that God and you eventually want, right? Like that is engaging in the maturation process, in the refinement process by stopping and saying, I need to pause here. I'm overwhelmed with trying to be humble or trying to not be jealous or whatever it is, right? But I just need to connect with you here in this moment, even without having mastered whatever I'm working toward, because I know that you love me and I want to feel that love. And I know that I love you. And that's why I'm doing this. And so engaging in that intimacy right then and there is actually engaging in the refinement process. In fact, it's the whole point of it in the long run.
mhm. Wow. And so it makes like it's hard because it's like, you wanna, like, grab it, but then also not hold it too hard because then it's like you do that thing of, like, "This is what I need in order to have God." It's like, no, but I suppose what we're getting at is the journey is the refinement. Like, it's
Yeah.
the walking beside God that we experience the refinement which, like, God, like, loves and is interested in, which is walking closely with him and experiencing where we are at that day with him. And letting him speak to it or be near it or, whatever it is. And which is, yeah, just so different to, I think, what a lot of certainly, certainly my Christian upbringing, but like, I think a lot of Christian upbringings kind of, um, uh, articulate about refinement, that is this like something you can achieve and then feel great about yourself or great about your relationship with God. It's like God just wants to enjoy us along the way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love that because when that's our perspective, not only do we get fed in our connection with God, right? We can say, "Ooh, I am really failing at humility this week, but God loves me and I love indulging in that," right? Like and thus we are still engaging in the refinement process. But
Hmm.
also when this is our perspective, there is no shame in not being
Right.
perfect, right? Like I think that's another distortion I grew up with was oh, if you haven't mastered this by, 10 years into walking with God or 5 years or 15 years into walking with God, then something's wrong, right? I think if we have this perspective, we can say, this has always been a weak spot for me. This is a space where God is still really refining me, where I'm still really engaging in that maturation, that transformation process with God. But we don't have to be ashamed about it because we will forever be imperfect this side of heaven. Like we will never master any trait, any Christian trait or otherwise, right? So there doesn't need to be any shame in it. We could just say, like, yep, I'm still plugging away, working at this part of refinement. But I know that God loves me and I can enjoy connection with him whether I, get better at this or not. And I think that is the ultimate measure of refinement is to be able to say, I know who God is. I know he loves me. I know who I am. I know I'm unworthy of his love, but I know I can accept it anyway.
Yeah, and I love what you said about like this idea that we sort of have this distortion around once I've been a Christian for 5 years or 10 years or 13 years or whatever.
Mhm.
Like I do think that's such a massive thing where it's like, wait, I've been reading my Bible for these amount of years now. Surely I should be more secure or more humble or less jealous or whatever. Like there is such that sense of a scale and like this sense of like I have walked with God for this long of my life, therefore I should be this holy. But in
Exactly.
actuality, like God so doesn't look at our journey with like this time scale of like, you know, Georgia has been a Christian for 13 years, therefore she should have 13 years amount of humility or security. Like God has been interested in my whole life, like from before I can remember to way after I don't even know. And like so he's not kind of working on the same timescale as us when it comes to our refinement
Yeah.
even.
That made me think about this question. What do you think about this? Can you measure refinement?
Surely not. Surely, right? Surely
Yeah,
not.
I
Yeah.
surely not. But I think we, in a lot of church cultures, certainly the one I grew up in, we try to, and we try to put refinement in a box and we say, like, I will tell you, I have someone close to me in life, I'm deciding whether or not to name who it is, but anyway, who says, you can always tell how spiritually mature someone is, how close to God someone is by the way that they pray out loud, right? And I grew up thinking every time I pray out loud, I think, oh no, they're judging how they're judging my refinement. They're judging how spiritually mature I am.
Yeah.
And now I realize like I just have always that just has always rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm.
And now again, right, like I'm always fighting for a messy middle perspective. So what can I validate in that perspective? Sure, I think to some extent we can say, if you're really unfamiliar with God, well, I guess it came down to this. I don't think refinement can be measured with any characteristic. If we were to take snapshots of certain people in the Bible who we know were incredibly close to God and really engaged in the refinement process, Elijah, for example, when he was up there, performing miracles, droughts, and rainstorms and all this stuff, we would have been like, wow, he has mastered, right? Like he's at the tip top of his refinement journey. Literally a week later, he's in the wilderness being fed by ravens saying like, God, just take my life now because, I'm so insecure. If we were to take snapshots, we certainly couldn't measure, at least not in a linear level up sort of way, like, oh, he was on level 10. Oh, but he regressed to level 2 after the fact, right? Same with Peter, same with David, right? Like all these big names in the Bible. we can't measure refinement based on outward characteristics or outward prayer,
Mm,
I will say, right? But if we had to measure refinement, like if God were like, that's just not really the way that it works. I don't measure refinement. But if you had to think of it in those earthly terms, the way I would measure refinement, I really think he would say is through intimacy with
right.
me. How close, it's not by how much you sin, how much you don't sin, what your speech is like, or what your thought life is like. It's about how close you are to me when you mess up, when you don't, when you're happy, when you're not, right? Like it's about I think that's the only really barometer we have to gauge our own refinement is, and even help other people in their refinement journey is how close are you? How connected, how intimate are you with God? And I guess even then we would have to say on a really broad level, because again, right, like when David was out there, doing some terrible things with people, sinning against people, could we say like, wow, you're so close to God right now? No, I don't think he probably felt close to
Right.
God. But when he was confronted with it, he ran back to God in his grief,
Mm,
in his sin, right? And I think that is a measure of his refinement, of his maturity in God. Like, I did mess up and now I'm going to run back to him because I've done this and long enough to know it's not if I mess up, it's when I mess up, I need to run back to God
yeah.
in that intimate connection. So, yeah, I think no, I don't think refinement can be measured. But if we had to think of it in some sort of measurement, I think the only way we could think of it is with intimacy with God. And even then, intimacy looks different at different seasons in our life with God.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes me think of one of my favorite scriptures regarding refinement. At least I think it regards refinement. That's how I read it. But it's interesting because I don't know if David wrote this psalm, but I'll have to look it up afterwards. But it's Psalm 84, and it says, uh blessed are those whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. Like it's like blessed are those whose strength are in you and whose hearts are set on the pilgrimage. And I love that idea of a heart set on pilgrimage, this idea of like those whose heart, their inner being, are concerned with the journey of walking with God. And you know, I've never been on a physical pilgrimage. I would love to do something like that one day, but from what I understand, like you experience such a variety of different landscapes on a pilgrimage. Like maybe, for very extreme ones, it's like walking through a desert or walking through a lush, a lush green oasis. And I think, that means you can experience, I think metaphorically, it could be like you experience God in desert places where maybe you feel his absence more than his presence. But then you also experience times of really lush green, like you see God in everything and he's so close. Like it's like, but it's this idea of like, regardless, it's still the pilgrimage, it's still the journey. Which I think is that where it's like intimacy can look different in different seasons. It can look like a desert season, it can look like a lush green oasis season. But it is about your heart is set on that journey and walking in it with God.
Oh my gosh, I love everything you just said. I would say again, rewind that, people. Listen to it again. That is so good. I love that. Have your heart set on pilgrimage. I think that is literally a 50,000-foot summary of the Christian life. But I remember learning in school, when you're a therapist, you have to be thinking on several planes at once. And so, right, like as therapists, we work with our clients on goals, right? We come up with a set of goals, agreed on goals, and we work toward those goals. But of course, those goals, it's not like you sit down for 3 sessions and you're like, all right, what do you need to do to achieve X, Y, and Z with these goals?
Right.
Exactly. It's not very linear. Everything in those people's lives, in our clients' lives, are tied to those goals. So
Mm,
they might come in with the goal to process through some trauma from their childhood. But before we can get to that, we've got to work through some marital issues that they're having. And then some, fires that pop up at work because of this triggers that they have in their trauma. And then some fires that come up with their kids because they're parenting out of their fear instead of out of their love, right? Like, so it might take a long time. It might be a really slow process to actually get down to the trauma
mm,
because there's a lot of other things tied to that trauma. And so when you're a therapist, when you're in a client or in a session with a client, you have to be thinking about the goals, but you also have to be engaged in the conversation that you're having right then and there, right? Exactly, moment to moment, talking about their marriage, but also thinking about how it relates to their trauma or
right.
their overall goal. And so I think that prepares us so well for this Christian journey of being oriented toward the pilgrimage, because when I see it in my mind in sort of like a visual, we are engaged in our daily life, right? The monotony of our daily life, getting up, going to work, getting ready for bed, all this stuff. But we also always have to recall that heart set above perspective where we're saying even in this monotony of life, we are still oriented, our hearts are oriented toward that pilgrimage. And how am I engaging in that refinement process, that intentional intimacy with God, even in the day-to-day of my life? And so I'll offer that as another practical to our listeners, that take it from the minds of two therapists, that you can think on the day-to-day plane, but also have your mind and your heart set on that ultimate pilgrimage. I think the other thing that prepares us well as therapists for that pilgrimage is, I remember being in grad school thinking, oh my gosh, I will never be the perfect therapist. Like, I will never master therapy, right? Like, there's always something more to learn. And even if you learned all the things you could possibly learn about theories and interventions and all this stuff, it's also very dependent on the person and your connection with your client, right? Because we're all different. We all have different worldviews. And so it frustrated me that there was not this pyramid that I could climb and become the ultimate therapist.
Mm-hmm.
But then after I sat with that for a little while, I realized that is actually so freeing, because I never want to get bored of this line of work, right? There's always something new to learn. There's always a personal refinement that I still can engage in that will help me with my clients. And so I think in the same way, we can adopt that mindset as Christians, that not only are we engaging in the monotony of life, but also oriented toward the ultimate pilgrimage in our refinement with God.
Mm-hmm.
But also, there's never a time where we will stop being refined this side of heaven. Like, I call it the Christian conundrum. We're like always engaged in continual refinement, but without the outcome expectation of perfection, right? We're always oriented toward perfection, but knowing we'll never reach it this side of heaven. And truly, I think the only way we can be okay with that, like tension-wise in our psyche and our souls, is if we make the outcome deeper connection with God.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was just thinking, like, being really sitting with that reality of like, oh wow, I'll never achieve complete security or whatever, or like there'll be new things that come my way that challenge this part of my character. I think it would be easy to feel kind of downtrodden by that, or to feel like defeated, I suppose, or to feel like, yeah, like it's like, oh, that's, what's the point? That sort of thing. But I think one, like, yeah, just remembering that like God's perspective on the journey is to do with us walking beside him, and it's not that sense of like the achievement, because yeah, he's already won. He's already done his son has already gone to the cross. He's paid the price. Like everything has already been done. And so now it's just an opportunity to be together. It actually reminds me, there's this song called Love Note. Have you ever heard of it? It's a worship
Mm-mm.
song. Um, but I love this lyric in it where it's like God giving a love note to his beloved,
Oh, I
so to us.
that.
Um,
Yeah.
and the lyric, I won't sing it, but I'll just say I'll just say it. But it says, "I'm bringing you back to the garden, back where it all started. All of your sins have been pardoned. Now we just get to be together." And I love it because it is like, even the bringing you back to the garden, like that's like, I'm doing the work. I'm the one that restores. And either way, anyway, your sins have been pardoned. I've paid the price. I've paid the price. The main thing is we now just get to be together. And and she says it, that line over and over. We just get to be together. And I think that's
My
like
gosh.
what God wants to give us, is like, I just want to be with you. I just get to be with you. Yeah.
I love that. I'm going to look that up
I'll send
immediately
it to
after
you.
yeah, thank you. Please do.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I love that. And you're right. That's what I just wish I could, I'm so glad we can offer this to our listeners, that if you are striving and feeling weary from striving, you have already been gifted. You've already been gifted what you are striving for.
Mhm.
You are not worthy in and of yourself of God's love. That part is true. And it's true that there's a distortion in your heart as a human to strive for perfection in order to feel good enough, in order to go be swept away to Eden with God and just be with him, right? I get that that's in there. I feel it too. Like, it's a part of the human condition. It's a part of living in a fallen world. But what I see in in the Bible and in my relationship with God and the relationship that my clients have with God is he is screaming, shouting, trying to get through to us. I have already done that. I don't need you. Right? If
Yeah.
your dad is right and God is the agent of our refinement, he doesn't need us
Yeah.
to do
Doesn't need
anything
the
with that.
striving.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't need our striving. He just wants us. He just wants our
Mm,
heart, our connection with us. Right. And so even in our striving, which we are called to engage in the refinement process, to partner with God in that refinement,
mm.
even in that, let's turn to him and achieve the ultimate goal of connection with him. That is the pilgrimage. It is really a pilgrimage toward deeper intimacy with God, even as we're working toward refinement and all these outward characteristics. The ultimate point of that is deeper intimacy with God. So I love that. Like, let his love note throughout the whole Bible, throughout the whole world, throughout your whole life, lure you to Eden with him, even in your refinement, and allow his love to wash over you, even as you're being more and more transformed into his likeness.
Wow. I feel like we could end on that note, to be honest.
Yes, I think we should.
I
That
think
is,
so.
I mean, right? Like, that is refinement. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Did we miss anything, Georgia?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think we need to add anything, to be honest. I feel like we've kind
Yeah,
of
I think that's
done a
good.
nice, all-encompassing.
I think so too. I think you started it. Maybe you should close it out. What do you think?
Sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this pilgrimage today. And that was Refinement, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye.